Welcome to my channel. Before you skip this video, I want you to do something that could change the rest of your life. Don't judge this story by its beginning. Stay until the very last moment because somewhere in the next few minutes, you may hear a sentence that becomes the turning point of your future. Imagine waking up tomorrow with the power to erase every excuse that has ever stopped you. Imagine looking into the mirror and seeing not the person you are today, but the person you are always capable of becoming. What if I told you that your greatest enemy has never been failure, bad luck, your past, or even the people who doubted you? What if your greatest enemy has been the invisible fear that quietly whispered, "You are not enough," every time you wanted to take a bold step forward? And what if today is the day that voice loses forever? Keep listening carefully, because this story is not about someone else. It may be about you. In a quiet village surrounded by endless mountains lived a young man named Daniel. Every morning he watched the sunrise from the roof of his small home, wondering why life rewarded everyone except him. He saw successful people achieving goals he could only dream about, and with every passing year, he became more convinced that ordinary people were never meant to live extraordinary lives. His dreams slowly became smaller, not because he lacked ability, but because he had listened to doubt for far too long. Whenever an opportunity appeared, fear arrived first. Whenever he imagined success, his mind reminded him of every mistake he had ever made. Instead of believing in possibilities, he collected reasons why nothing would ever change. One evening, after another disappointing day, Daniel walked alone toward the highest mountain overlooking the village. The wind was cold, the sky was painted with the colors of sunset, and the silence around him seemed louder than any words. Standing at the edge of the mountain, he asked himself a question that would change everything. If I continue living exactly as I do today, where will I be 10 years from now? The answer frightened him. He saw a future filled with regret, unfinished dreams, and endless excuses. For the first time, he realized that staying the same was more dangerous than trying and failing. Before leaving that mountain, Daniel made a promise that nobody else heard. He promised that from the next sunrise onward, he would stop waiting for confidence and begin earning it. The following morning, while the rest of the village still slept, Daniel woke before dawn. His body wanted comfort, but his future demanded discipline. He exercised, read a few pages from a book, wrote down his goals, and spent time learning something new before anyone else had even started their day. The changes seemed tiny, almost meaningless, but Daniel trusted that small actions repeated consistently would eventually create extraordinary results. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Nothing magical happened overnight. There were no shortcuts, no lucky breaks, and no sudden success. Many people laughed at his new routine. Some told him he was wasting his time because ordinary people never accomplish extraordinary things. Their words hurt, but instead of allowing criticism to stop him, Daniel allowed it to strengthen his determination. Every insult became fuel. Every obstacle became another opportunity to grow stronger. Slowly, something invisible began changing inside him. His confidence no longer depended on compliments. His happiness no longer depended on perfect circumstances. He discovered that true confidence is built every time you keep a promise to yourself. Every difficult morning made him stronger. Every challenge increased his patience. Every setback taught him another lesson that success alone could never provide. Then life tested him harder than ever before. An opportunity he had spent years preparing for disappeared in a single day. Everything he had worked towards seemed to collapse before his eyes. Friends told him it was time to accept reality and stop chasing impossible dreams. For a brief moment, the old voice of fear returned, whispering that perhaps they were right. Daniel stood silently beneath the same sunrise that had witnessed the beginning of his journey. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" he asked, "What is this moment trying to teach me?" That single question changed everything. At that moment, he understood that success is not measured by how many times life knocks you down. It is measured by how many times you choose to stand back up. Without realizing it, Daniel had already won the most important battle of his life, because the greatest victory is not defeating the world. The greatest victory is defeating the fear inside yourself and his extraordinary journey had only just begun. The morning after his greatest disappointment, Daniel stood quietly outside his home as the first rays of sunlight touched the mountains. The opportunity he had worked toward for years was gone, yet for the first time he refused to let failure decide his future. He took a deep breath and reminded himself of the promise he had made on the mountain: never allow temporary setbacks to destroy permanent dreams. Instead of feeling defeated, he picked up his notebook and wrote a single sentence that would guide every decision from that day forward. I cannot control what happens to me, but I can always control how I respond. Those words became his daily reminder whenever life tested his patience. He returned to his routine with even greater determination. Before sunrise, he exercised, not because he enjoyed the discomfort, but because he knew discipline was stronger than motivation. Every evening, he studied new skills while others spent hours complaining about problems they refused to solve. He stopped comparing his journey with anyone else's because he realized every successful person travels a different road. Some arrive quickly, while others take longer. But the only race that truly matters is becoming better than the person you were yesterday. Weeks passed, and Daniel noticed a remarkable change. His mind no longer searched for excuses. Instead, it searched for solutions. Every obstacle became a puzzle to solve instead of a wall that forced him to stop. One afternoon, while walking through the town, he met an elderly gardener carefully watering a small tree that looked too weak to survive. Curious, Daniel asked why he continued caring for a tree that seemed unlikely to grow. The old man smiled and replied, "Because I am not watering the tree I see today. I am watering the tree it will become years from now." Those simple words stayed with Daniel for the rest of the day. He suddenly realized that every good habit he practiced was like watering that small tree. Reading a few pages, learning a new skill, waking up early, staying healthy, and refusing to give up were all investments in a future that could not yet be seen. Most people quit because they expect immediate results, but nature never works that way. A seed spends months growing invisible roots before anyone sees the first leaf. Success follows the same pattern. The strongest foundations are always built before the greatest achievements appear. That realization filled him with patience he had never possessed before. As the seasons changed, another opportunity arrived. A local entrepreneur noticed Daniel's commitment and invited him to help with an important project. The work was demanding, the expectations were high, and mistakes happened almost every day. Instead of becoming discouraged, Daniel welcomed every correction as another lesson. He understood that criticism from people who genuinely wanted him to improve was far more valuable than empty praise. Slowly, his confidence grew stronger because it was built on real experience rather than wishful thinking. His progress inspired others who had once laughed at his ambitions. Friends who had doubted him now asked how he remained so determined despite facing repeated failures. Daniel simply smiled and answered, "Every difficult day is training me for responsibilities I could never carry if life were always easy." His words surprised many because they expected a secret formula or a shortcut to success. They failed to understand that consistency itself was the secret. One evening, life presented another unexpected challenge. A close friend betrayed his trust for personal gain. The pain was real, and for a moment anger almost consumed him. He wanted revenge. He wanted justice. But then he remembered that carrying resentment would only slow his own journey. Instead, he chose forgiveness not because betrayal was acceptable, but because he refused to let bitterness occupy space in a heart that was meant for growth. That decision gave him a peace no victory could have purchased. He learned that true strength is not found in defeating another person. It is found in mastering your own emotions when life gives you every reason to lose control. Standing once again on the mountain at sunset, Daniel looked across the valley with a smile. The road ahead was still uncertain, and many dreams remained unfinished, but something far more important had already happened. The frightened young man who once doubted every step had become someone who trusted the process even when he could not see the destination. He finally understood that extraordinary lives are not built through extraordinary moments alone. They are built through ordinary decisions, repeated with unwavering faith, relentless discipline, and the courage to continue walking forward long after everyone else has stopped believing. And as another sunrise waited just beyond the horizon, Daniel knew that his greatest challenges and his greatest victories were still waiting for him. As another season arrived, Daniel realized that success had changed its meaning. In the past, he believed success meant reaching a destination, earning recognition, or proving his worth to the people who had doubted him. Now he understood that real success begins long before the applause. It begins in the quiet moments when no one is watching, when you choose discipline over comfort, hope over fear, and action over excuses. Every sunrise reminded him that he had another opportunity to become stronger than he had been yesterday. He no longer feared difficult roads because he had learned that the most beautiful views are always waiting at the top of the hardest climbs. One morning, while walking through the forest, Daniel noticed a tiny stream flowing around enormous rocks that blocked its path. Instead of stopping, the water calmly found another way forward. Sometimes it moved around the obstacle, sometimes it slowly carved a path through it. Watching the stream, Daniel smiled because nature had just taught him another unforgettable lesson. Obstacles are only permanent for people who stop moving. Those who remain patient and determined always discover another path. That simple truth became part of his daily life. Whenever problems appeared, he no longer asked, "Why is this happening?" Instead, he asked, "What is the next step I can take?" His focus shifted from worrying about circumstances to finding solutions, and that single change made every challenge feel smaller. As time passed, the entrepreneur who had given Daniel his first opportunity trusted him with greater responsibilities. At first, the pressure seemed overwhelming. Important decisions affected many people, and the fear of making mistakes returned. But this time, Daniel welcomed the responsibility instead of running from it. He remembered that confidence is not created by avoiding difficult situations. It is created by facing them with courage, learning from every mistake, and refusing to quit after failure. He worked harder than ever before, listened more than he spoke, accepted advice from experienced mentors, and treated every setback as another lesson preparing him for greater opportunities. His growth became impossible to ignore. People who had once laughed at his dreams now admired his determination. Young people from the village often visited him, asking how they could change their own lives. Daniel never claimed to possess extraordinary talent. Instead, he told them the truth. Your future is shaped by what you repeatedly do every day. One positive habit may seem small, but thousands of small habits create an extraordinary life. He encouraged them to read instead of wasting hours on distractions, to wake early with purpose, to care for their health, and to believe in themselves even when nobody else did. Some followed his advice immediately, while others doubted him just as people had once doubted Daniel. He smiled because he understood that every person must choose their own path. One evening, an unexpected visitor arrived at his home. It was an old friend who had once mocked his ambitions and discouraged him from chasing impossible dreams. The friend looked tired, disappointed, and filled with regret. Quietly, he admitted that he had spent years waiting for life to improve while doing nothing to improve himself. Looking at Daniel, he asked, "Is it too late for me to change?" Daniel placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder and replied, "The best time to change was years ago. The second best time is today. As long as you are alive, another chapter can always begin." Those words brought tears to the man's eyes because they gave him something he had almost lost forever: hope. From that day forward, they worked together, proving that a new beginning is always possible for those willing to take the first courageous step. As another year passed, Daniel climbed the mountain where his journey had first begun. Standing at the summit, he looked over the valley with gratitude instead of regret. He realized that every painful memory had become a stepping stone leading him toward this moment. The failures that once embarrassed him had become stories of resilience. The criticism that once hurt him had strengthened his character. The loneliness that once frightened him had taught him self-belief. He finally understood that life does not reward people who never struggle. It rewards those who refuse to surrender. Looking toward the horizon as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the distant mountains, Daniel smiled with complete confidence. He knew more challenges would come, more dreams would appear, and more lessons would shape the road ahead. But he also knew something that fear could never take away again. A person who has learned to trust themselves, embrace growth, remain grateful through hardship, and continue moving forward with faith possesses a strength that no obstacle can permanently defeat. With renewed purpose filling his heart, Daniel took another step toward tomorrow, knowing that the greatest chapter of his story was still waiting just beyond the next sunrise. The final chapter of Daniel's journey did not begin with a celebration or a moment of glory. It began with a quiet sunrise that reminded him how far he had come. Standing once again on the mountain where everything had started, he looked across the valley with a heart full of gratitude. Years earlier, he had climbed this same path carrying fear, doubt, and disappointment. Back then, he believed that life had forgotten him, that success belonged only to fortunate people, and that his dreams were too big for someone like him. Today, as the golden sunlight covered the mountains, he realized that the greatest transformation had never happened around him. It had happened within him. The mountains had not become smaller. The road had not become easier. The world had not suddenly removed every obstacle from his path. The only thing that had truly changed was the person who had chosen to keep walking when quitting seemed easier. That realization became the greatest victory of his life. As Daniel walked back toward the village, he noticed something beautiful. The people around him were no longer the same. The young boy who once feared failure was now leading community projects with confidence. The elderly gardener continued planting trees whose shade he knew he might never enjoy, teaching everyone that the greatest investments are made for the future. Families who had once argued over small misunderstandings were helping one another through difficult times. Hope had quietly spread from one person to another, proving that one courageous decision can inspire countless lives. Daniel understood that success becomes meaningful only when it gives others permission to believe in themselves. One afternoon, a group of young dreamers gathered around him and asked the question he had heard many times before. "What is the secret behind your success?" Daniel smiled because he knew they were expecting a complicated answer. Instead, he looked at them and said, "There is no secret. I simply made one small decision every day that moved me closer to the person I wanted to become." Success is not created by one extraordinary moment. It is created by thousands of ordinary moments when you choose discipline instead of comfort, learning instead of excuses, gratitude instead of complaints, and courage instead of fear. The young people listened carefully because they recognized the honesty in his words. Daniel continued, "Never wait until you feel ready. If you wait for perfect confidence, perfect timing, or perfect circumstances, you may spend your entire life waiting. Start with what you have, where you are, and trust that every step forward will make the next step easier." Those words remained in their hearts long after they left. As the years passed, Daniel continued learning because he believed that the moment a person stops growing is the moment they stop truly living. Every new experience taught him humility. Every challenge reminded him to stay patient. Every success reminded him to remain grateful. He no longer chased applause because he had discovered that peace of mind is more valuable than public recognition. He no longer compared himself with others because he understood that every life follows its own unique timeline. His only competition was the person he had been yesterday. One evening, while watching the sunset from the same mountain that had witnessed the beginning of his journey, Daniel reflected on every lesson life had given him. He realized that failure had never been his enemy. Fear had, comfort had, self-doubt had. Once he defeated those invisible enemies, every visible obstacle became easier to overcome. He smiled as he remembered the frightened young man who once questioned his worth beneath the evening sky. If he could speak to that younger version of himself now, he would say only one thing: keep going. The pain you feel today is preparing you for the strength you will need tomorrow. Do not let temporary struggles convince you to abandon permanent dreams. As darkness slowly covered the valley and the first stars appeared above him, Daniel understood that every ending is also a new beginning. There would always be another mountain to climb, another lesson to learn, another fear to overcome, and another opportunity to grow. Life was never meant to become easy. It was meant to make him stronger, wiser, kinder, and more grateful with every passing year. Before leaving the mountain for the final time, he looked toward the endless horizon and made one last promise to himself. No matter where life led him, he would continue encouraging others to believe in themselves, because hope is the greatest gift one person can give another. And if this journey leaves you with only one lesson, let it be this: never allow yesterday's failures to steal today's opportunities. Never allow someone else's opinion to become your identity. Never allow fear to become louder than your dreams. Every sunrise brings another chance to rewrite your story. Every challenge hides another lesson. Every setback carries another opportunity to grow. Believe in yourself before the world believes in you. Stay humble when success arrives. Remain patient when difficulties appear. And never stop becoming a better version of yourself. One day you will look back and realize that the obstacles you once feared became the very foundation of your greatest victories. Your journey is far from over. Your purpose is still unfolding. Your greatest chapter has not been written yet. So take the next step with courage, keep moving with faith, trust the process even when you cannot see the destination, and remember that extraordinary lives are built by ordinary people who refuse to give up, one determined step, one courageous decision, and one hopeful sunrise at a time.